I want to hand over to our chair, Michael Han, who's the music editor of The Guardian, one of our partners on Joining the Dots, for our first session, which is called Joining the Dots Show and Tell. Thank you very much.
Hello. I'd like to start with a bit of interactivity, but I'm not going to make anyone role play being a tree unless they particularly want to. I'd like to ask you some questions and see some hands. Now, the first is, who hears most of their music these days from the radio or the television? I think that's 3. Who gets most of their music by buying it from record shops? Oh, we might even be up to 6 or 7 there. Who gets most of their music by buying it in any form? Oh, so that's probably about 2/3. And who finds out about new music and musicians by reading print media? Oh, I love you people. I adore you people. But the fact is that 10 years ago, I think that show of hands would have been completely different. All of you probably, unless you were way ahead of the curve, would have had your hands up for all those questions. And that's recorded music. Now, but live music's in a state of flux as well. I don't think 10 years ago it would ever have occurred to me that I could go and see a buzz band, a band I'd actually heard of, for free in central London. But now venues like the Old Blue Last are putting on these shows with bands that you hear talked about, that you hear on the radio, and you can go for free. Now, clearly, the promoters haven't thought about the major issue there, which is that if everyone could get in for free, what incentive is there for journalists who are used to guest lists to go along? But what's clear is that in this world, it's now possible for musicians to build audiences without going down the old routes. In the world of YouTube, we've seen a new wave of stars created by interacting with their audience directly, with no mediation. So someone like Tiffany Alvord is as famous to her generation, my daughter's generation, as U2 is to mine. And she's someone who's become a star by bypassing entirely old media and old music business. It's strictly through YouTube. But building an audience isn't just about becoming a superstar. This new world enables artists to gain attention in many different ways: social media, blogs, videos, and that in turn means it drives attention back to live performance. It's a fascinating paradox, I think, that the more technology develops, the more important the oldest way to play and consume music in a crowd at a concert has become. Now, as Julia said, this event is about combining the curious and the generous. I'm very much in the curious camp. I'm 45 years old. I have a large collection of music that I own. I hate streams. I like the old-fashioned way of doing things, but I know I've got to change. So I'm hoping the 5 people, in fact, that I have either side of me today are going to help me understand the ways in which we can change. Now, we've got Paul Archer of the Daredevil Project, a games company. We've got Joey Baxter from EventBox, who's doing something that I suggested we do at The Guardian years ago, but no one took any notice of me, so really I am a digital visionary. We've got Hamish Dunbar and John Chandler from Cafe Otto, one of London's most forward-thinking venues, and Jeff Thompson from Unconvention. Now, all four groups, 5 people, have been funded in some way by Joining the Dots, because what they're doing helps point towards the future for music. These are people who have the potential to be game changers for independent music. And what they share with you today, you could be seeing everywhere in a few years' time. Certainly, that's the way we'll look at it, not what you hear today you will have forgotten by tomorrow. Let's be optimistic. I'm afraid you can't ask some questions during the sessions, but that's because they will all be doing special 1-hour presentations downstairs later today in the Storrow room, where you can learn a whole lot more. You can sign up on the door of the room or just turn up. I suspect, given that we're running late, any element of interaction may be confined to the very end of this session, and maybe we can all have a chat about the things that we've heard during the previous, 48 minutes. Now, first up, it's Paul Archer of the Daredevil Project.
Great. Thank you very much. Now, I think I feel a little bit like an imposter here. I run Daredevil Project, and we make games, which doesn't really fit in this as a music conference, but I'll explain a little bit more about what that means. What we specialize in are mobile social games that people play in the real world. So our main product that we've been working on is a game called Challenge Off, which is it's kind of like a picture scavenger hunt, turned on its head. And we run these as team events for various different people, anything from events, ticketed events, all the way up to corporate team building and everywhere in between. And it was with this idea in mind that we joined in with the guys here at the Hub to, well, we basically wanted to take that idea of teams carrying out challenges and around the place and then make it into a game that people could play at gigs and at music festivals and actually apply these game methodologies, a bit of play, and then turn that onto music. And we're probably way more in the more experimental end of the spectrum here because we didn't really know what we were doing when we came into it. And subsequently, the game that we developed, the idea of having teams scattered around festivals and events and venues all over the country, all competing to do challenges, photos, the best way they possibly can. We were testing it and we found that it just didn't work. It was a massive flop. There was just something there in that team dynamic that didn't really mesh. So, but what we did find was that individuals were really competitive about the way that they're interacting, especially at music events, at gigs, and they're sharing their photos. And I know there's definitely going to split the audience in half there, the idea of people taking photos and using their phones at gigs. Because I personally am in two minds about it, but what we're finding is that it's actually a really interesting way of getting broadcasting the content out there. And we came up with our game, Duel. So Duel is a competitive photo sharing game where you have a tag, a simple tag, very similar to a hashtag. In fact, it is a hashtag in many cases, that you use as your stimulus, your motivation to go out and do something. In this case, just use a very, very generic one, sunshine. This was me in the sunshine with a pint yesterday, took it. And now I'm going to challenge my friends to a duel to see if they can do the best thing for it. So that tag could be anything. You see a couple of ones there. We've got Glastonbury, we've got Tessellate, we've got Energy, Style. What it means, it doesn't matter. You've got a maximum of 15 characters, and that acts as, you can read that and interpret that in any way that you want. So you send it to one or many or multiple of your friends or to anyone out there as a random way of interacting with people within the vicinity where you are or actually anyone in the world. And then as part of the game, there's a deal is for every duel that you take part in, you must judge someone else's. So this is the case. You see two pictures. This is someone else's duel. You see that they're playing Hollywood, and you tap the best. You don't know them. You don't know anything about them. It's just a purely subjective decision-making process that you do, and you tap it, quite like a Hot or Not or Tinder, as other people have been using it. And then you wait and browse. As soon as your friends have taken a picture and they've entered into the duel, it's going to get judged by another player, and then you wait and you can get your results. In this case, you lost, I lost because someone was at a festival in the sunshine, they took a shot there, and they put that through, and I lost for it. That's the very, very basic concept that we've been coming up with here. It's pretty straightforward. What we're trying to do here is create a platform. There's a lot of flexibility that people can interpret in their own ways. They can use it for anything. It's rolled out in quite a similar way to Twitter, so it's completely open-ended. You can discover people, you can have followers, you can be followed by people. It doesn't matter where your profile is. You could be Joe Bloggs down the street, you could be Lady Gaga, you could be Red Bull, you could be everyone in between, the same way that users, you have the same access to the platform. You just might have more followers. And then also you have trending duels, exactly the same way as you have a trending hashtag. And this allows us to rank people and to rank all the photos, because for every one that gets judged, we can actually play around with it. We can match different photos for the same duel against each other and build up a ranking. So if you're doing a Glastonbury one, for example, and you're going to have multiple duels going on, we can calculate the best one according to the crowd. And that's where this is quite exciting for it. And in the future, we're going to be bringing in the ability to draw and comment, to message. We're going to have videos in there, a Facebook app for the judging, and also an API so we can tie it in. So instead of just making a photo duel, we can duel for 10 seconds of a clip of a tune, for example. You want to say, this is the best bit of my song. I want to see if you can do a better bit of your song, and put them against each other and find out what everybody who's playing thinks is the best. So this is it, for example. Like I said, you've got followers. And then here's an example of the ranking one at the moment. We're just coming to the end of the prototyping. We're testing it, and we've got already quite a few people who are addicted to it, already dueling with all their friends, and every time they're on a bus, they're judging everybody else's. It's probably going to get launched quite soon, but I'll go into that in a bit. How this is actually applicable for music is really open-minded. We would love to hear from you guys if you've got any different ways that you want to approach it. For example, it could be a way if you're launching a new album as an artist, you have different jewels for each track title, or you've got a theme. If you're on tour, your tour's got a name, or if you're having a duel for a certain vicinity, a certain venue when you reach one, and you're comparing cities against each other, all the people who are there are going to be dueling against each other, who can take the best photo, who can sort of broadcast their experience in the most innovative way. You can tie in with your own personality, work with the fans, duel with fans, get fans dueling against each other, duel against other artists and bands. And then also venues can use it as another way of interacting and getting really, really high quality shareable content out of it, which is generated by the users. We're working on the idea that all the images are going to be completely open-ended, so you can share it. And if there's any way that there's monetization which is coming from that with interactions with brands and companies who want to take advantage of those images, that money will go straight back to the guys who are taking them in the first place. And there's a way of actually organizing competitions there. So if you can say, I want to have the best jewels at my gig for this particular tag, you can give away prizes and things like that to motivate them, but at the same time you're also getting that conversation going in a different way, which is also competitive. So this crowdsourced data ranking, this is apply the game algorithm and API to provide fair crowdsourced ranking to other users. That doesn't make any sense. Basically what we're saying is that you're able to build a ranking system for anything, really. Not just the pictures. It can be SoundCloud clips. It can be short videos. You can have a voting system on what people want you to do through this by comparing side-by-side things and actually carry out other challenges or anything you want to do with it in market research. So the very, very basic plan is we're soft launching it. We're based in Bristol, which is the perfect place to be doing this. We're going to launch it in the next month or two there and start testing it and start seeing how people are using it, how local artists are using it, and how actually the punters are using it in different ways, interacting not just with venues, but also restaurants and bars and places around there to actually get some really, really interesting competitions and duels going on. We're going to be launching early next year. Work with some of the early adopters and artists, as well as vloggers as well, as a way, like you're saying, of sort of bypassing the typical media. It's the same way that we're creating a new platform for people to interact, and we're hoping that they'll use it and adapt it to it there, and also be able to work with using our technology to work on other sides of it. We're a bit of the wild card here, I think what we're doing with it. We went into this with a relatively loose idea, and we're experimenting with the different ways that we can actually add these game methodologies, the idea of making going to an event and to a gig and interacting with people a competitive thing. And this is what we've created, and really, really excited to start testing it as soon as it goes out there. So I'll be around if you've got any ideas, you want to have a chat, you have a little play around with it, I'll be in the thing in a bit. My name's Paul Archer, thank you very much.
Next up, it's Jeff Thompson from Unconvention.
There you go. Hello. Yes, I'm Jeff from Unconvention. I'm here to talk about a new touring network that we're working on called Off Axis. So our game-changing idea, Julia's sort of challenge when she put forward the funding opportunity was, what is a game-changing idea for the independent music sector? Our game-changing idea is to have a system where independent and grassroots bands can play anywhere in the country to a sold-out show, to a guaranteed audience, and get paid for doing it in a place they've never visited before, which sounds like a big challenge. This is a picture, it's not the best picture, I took it, from about 2 weeks ago in Chester. That's 100 people on a Friday night at a gig. They're watching a band from 270 miles away in Hastings that they'd never heard of until 9 o'clock that night, and the band had never been to Chester before. But not only was it, I mean, it was a fantastic gig, I was there, they were playing in front of the right audience. They were playing in front of 100 people that were going to, well, there was a very good chance we're going to love what they were doing. So that's kind of starting at the end, if that makes sense. Oh, starting at the end of the beginning. There you go. Why are we doing it? The impetus came from, I run a record label in Manchester, or a couple of record labels. So I work with the sort of bands that this system's around. And I say independent, grassroots, emerging bands, whatever you want to call it, but basically bands that aren't really famous. Now, the thing you might know, if anyone's in a band or works with bands or manages band, touring bands, putting a band somewhere where they're not known is a very, very difficult thing to do. step back a bit. 2008, we started doing some conferences, very similar to this sort of event you're at today, called Unconvention, where we got together record labels, producers, promoters, to talk about what was and wasn't working in the industry. And a lot of what we talked about was the positives of the internet. And in 2008, it was very much at the heart of the doom and gloom of the music industry. It was, the internet's going to kill everything, music's going to die, blah, 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 blah. But we had quite an optimistic view of what was now possible in terms of fan engagement. So we were doing these events, and we did them in Edinburgh. Well, when I spoke up in Edinburgh, we do them in places like Cardiff. Obviously, we're from Manchester, Macclesfield, but even in places like Groningen. Lots of positive talk about, like Michael mentioned, you can build a fan base with YouTube and all these things. But the one thing that kept coming up, because our audience was probably very much like the audience that we have here today, is bands could not move around. They couldn't do it. They still can't. As I say, I've got bands in Manchester that can sell 300 and 400 tickets in Manchester. I can't get them a gig in Leeds because no one in Leeds has heard of them. So that was the challenge we had. And in particular, we were doing some work in Groningen, where there's a festival called Eurosonic in the Netherlands, and we'd go there a couple of times and see really phenomenal bands. And we'd watch them and go, this is great, you're great. We'd chat to them afterwards, talk about how wonderful everyone was. And of course, I get back to Manchester to a handful of emails from these bands saying, oh, Jeff, thanks for coming to the show, glad you liked us. We'd love to come and play in Manchester, can you help us? And I'm like, well, you know what? I know a lot of people in Manchester. I know the good guys, I know the promoters, and I'm still going to struggle to get you a gig. Because what the promoters are going to say is, Jeff, we love you, you're great. They're not going to bring any people, and that's not going to pay my sound engineer, blah, 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 blah. So what we did was, and this isn't the new idea, but this is the basis of it, we gig swapped. So there was no point me going to the promoters and saying, can you put this band from the Netherlands, they're brilliant, because we all know that it wasn't going to make for a good show. So what I was doing was finding bands that were similar to those bands in Manchester that already had 100, 200 fans, and I was saying, look, next time you're going to go and put on a show and you're going to put all that work in and get your fans down, will you let one of these bands from the Netherlands that would match your style, you know, we weren't just randomly putting stuff together, come and play for you. So we did that, and the first one was a band called Astrid that played at Sound Control, so maybe it's 200 people. And that was the first instance of a band that no one had heard of playing in front of a crowd that was the right crowd. But gig swapping's been around, I don't know if you're aware of it, it's not uncommon. That was great. The problem with that is, and we did a few of those and we could do some around the queue. It basically came down to people who got in touch with me and my network and me trying to find bands to match this and the other. It was just a finite thing. It was something nice to do. And other people do gig next very successfully. But on our travels with Unconvention, in 2009, we did some events in Brazil. And this is where we first came across an organization called the Fora do Eixo. Fora do Eixo is Brazilian. I translate it as off-axis. It's actually more off the axis. That's where we got the name from. I don't have time, because I've only got 12 minutes, to tell you all about the Fora do Eixo. It's a phenomenal network. It's 200 cities working together. They put on lots of festivals. It started in this town called Cuiabá there, which is away from Rio and Sao Paulo, and that's where they got the off-axis name from. But what's interesting about what works in Brazil is bands can move around quite readily. And again, I can't explain the whole system, but it's underpinned by the fact that they have their own currency. So if anyone knows what a LET scheme is, a local economy trading scheme, or the Bristol pound, it's the notion that if you've got a skill and you want to share those skills, you can barter. But barter's limited. But if you can put your own currency on it, you can barter much more readily. You've then got a trading system. So, you know, what they were starting with is graphic designers were helping out another band who owned a studio, and that band would let them use their studio, etc. But that's very limited. I have to need what you want, you have to need what I want. So you put a value on those things, 10 cube as they called it, after the town Cuiabá. So that's how this trading system allowed things to expand, and that inspired us a lot. So, and I think the phrase that summed it up is Felipe, who's one of the main guys at Fora do Eixo, is they'd managed to put a tangible value on camaraderie, which I love that phrase, because that's what gig swapping is. It's people helping people out. It's people going, I like your band, I want you to come and play with us, and we want to do this. But this puts a tangible value on it, and it's important to have that tangible value on it. From the gig swapping we were already doing, when I was looking at this as a system, I was thinking, well, what's the really valuable thing that bands have? And the really valuable thing that bands have is the audience that they've got in front of them when they play live, or one of the really valuable things. That's valuable to them, but that's immensely valuable to another band from another town. Yep, on the gig swap system. If you've got 200 people in a room that love indie rock and roll band, that audience is worth a lot to an indie rock and roll band from Bristol or from Wrexham or from Swansea. So we wanted to sort of put this all into one system. So in 2012, we came up with this idea for off-axis, and we got initially a bit of money off the Technology Strategy Board, also the PRS Foundation, and then we've also now had some off Joining the Dots to start building a network. And really, this network is all about people being able to trade their audience. So I'm rushing through, but come and see me in the outlet. How it literally works: you're in a band and you join the off-axis network. You don't actually just join the off-axis network. You have to be invited. It's not an open system. It's not Facebook. It's not SoundCloud. You can't just think we want to be part of it. You have to apply it. I mean, that involves applying to me as such. But when you join the network, I'll explain why you have to apply. When you join the network, you put on a gig. You put on a gig in your hometown, and you're responsible for making that a great gig. You bring the audience along. You promote it, this or the other. Whilst doing that, you use the off-axis network to identify a similar band from a different town that you could put on with you. That's what we had there in that first photograph. That's where you've got a picture of a band from Hastings, 270 miles away, playing in front of an audience that someone else has put there. So that's a gig swap. The twist with off-axis is once that show's complete, the host of that band gets a credit on the off-axis system. The band who was hosted gets a credit deducted. And you need those credits in order to be eligible to go and play other shows, and hence that's a trading system. So if you want to be able to go and play in other towns and cities that you've never played to before, in front of guaranteed audiences, the way you do that is you host bands in your hometown. And because it's a trade system, for every slot taken, another one has to be generated somewhere else. Does that make sense? Sorry, I'm an economist. But the first initial advantage over a gig swap is, because everything's got a value, you never lose that gig. When we were gig swapping, we'd work really hard to put a band on from Cambridge. They'd absolutely have a great show. They'd win loads of fans, sell loads of CDs. 3 weeks later, they'd break up. And we're sat there going, well, we never got our chance to go back. That doesn't matter in off-axis because you've got your credit. It lives longer than the band that you swap with. You're not swapping one for one. I didn't really make that point. Just because you hosted a band from one town doesn't mean that you have to go back to town. You can, but you can use it anywhere in the system. The thing that I think is most exciting is, a couple of things. It significantly expands the network of it's not just who I know and who I know. It's a system that we can make people aware of. They can join. They can be from anywhere. The way it works is all of the artists in the system, this is why it's not an open system, have to be able to produce a hometown show with at least 70 people there. So every off-axis show will have at least 70. It might be 100, it might be 200, it might be 500. The reason it's 70 is because I made up the figure 70. But also it's because we want these gigs to happen in towns that might not be Manchester and Leeds and London. And 70 is a lot of people in some places. Yep, so it's I think reasonable. The bands are matched by genres. We're not having metal bands playing with folk bands. The idea, again, going back to my picture from Chester, is the audience you're playing in front of is an audience that should suit you because you're matched by the style of the bands you're with. It's a free-to-use and non-exclusive system. So what we see the benefits is, well, first off, that's thousands of new opportunities for artists to play in new towns and cities, places they've never been before. It opens up opportunities in places that might have previously been overlooked. So what's been interesting for us when we started is we've done gigs in the likes of Derby and Chester with bands from Wrexham and Stockton-on-Tees. When we put bands out traditionally, as I said, we're a record label, in this country you look at 10 towns. You look at London, Brighton, Bristol, Birmingham, Manchester, you might go to Nottingham, but that's it. This is a system where 70 people in Ipswich is worth exactly the same as 70 people in London. And 70 people in Carlisle is worth the same, or 95 people in Carlisle is worth the same as 104 people in Manchester. The reason we want to get people in front of people in rooms, well, first of all, bands want to go and play at more people, but that's an opportunity to generate a genuine national fan base. YouTube is one way of doing it, but I always think being in a room at 9:30 at night when everyone's drunk and blowing their heads off is a good way of winning fans as well. And the bigger idea and what we want to develop for the second phase is that we make this an audience-facing brand. So off-axis at the minute is a community of bands who subscribe to this idea. But we get to the point where the off-axis logo on a poster means something to an audience. So, people are walking down the street in Norwich and they see a big poster of a local band and it's got an off-axis logo on. What that means is not only is that a very good local band, but on that night, they're going to be playing with an exceptional band from somewhere else in the country that's probably never been there before. Where we're literally at is, here's some screenshots. It works a bit like you can have a profile as a band. It's got the important details like your music. It'll have maybe, we've got downloads for tech specs, things like that. It works off a news feed. Every time a gig gets added, you get a notification. It links it all by, you search by genres, and essentially you have a bank account at the back of it, a credit sheet, you know, what you own, what you don't. I've probably run out of time. We can look at the other ideas is how we can link those credits into festivals, how we can work abroad. And that's my email address if you need to speak to me, and I'll be around this afternoon. Did that make any sense whatsoever? Yeah. All right, good, thank you.
And now we turn to Hamish Dunbar and John Chandler from Cafe Otto.
Hi. So I founded Cafe Otto back in 2008 with my partner. And John's been working with us almost from the start. And I'm going to talk a little bit. He looks shocked. I'm going to talk a little bit about Cafe Otto and the context in which we work. And then John's going to talk a little bit about the project that we're doing. I think it's important that I do that because I think the reason we think this will work is quite specific in some respects to what we do and where it's come from. Cafe Otto was started with no funding. It was a very kind of small grassroots organization, just me and my partner. And it opened in a warehouse in Hackney. We've been putting gigs on for a couple of years before that, but the reason we started the venue was there really wasn't a space that was putting on the kind of music that we were presenting at the time. And the idea with Cafe Otto was to give London a kind of dedicated space for what some people might describe as experimental or underground music. Quite quickly we started doing stuff 7 nights a week, and the program now is about 300 odd events, over 300 events a year. And initially we were employing no staff, it was just the two of us doing that, and gradually we started to employ a few people, and then we set up Otto Projects, which is a community interest company which now manages the program at Cafe Otto. And we receive a little bit of funding to run that program, but the bulk of our income is still generated through ticket sales, so it still needs to rely on us getting in a set number of people each night to try and make those shows cover their costs. But what's been really, what I think's made Cafe Otto work is we've always had a very clear focus around our program. It's really the only venue in the country that's presenting that kind of music with that frequency. And a lot of the work that we present there is collaborative things with musicians. It might be groups of musicians that never have played before. Sometimes they've never played together before until they actually start playing in front of the audience on the stage. So lots of those encounters are kind of unrepeatable things, and we knew from looking at our web stats and who picks up our emails that a lot of those people that follow what we do are not based in London, and quite a lot of them aren't based in the UK. And so we started to think about ways in which we could involve and engage the people that maybe can't come to the shows that we present. Obviously what we're doing is quite a niche thing in terms of the music, so we're never going to, there's always going to be a relatively small group of people that might be interested in going, and a smaller group still that will actually be able to go on that specific time, on that specific night, at that specific place. And so we wanted to reach out and try and reach all the people that were interested in what we were doing and following what we were doing, but couldn't physically get there. So that's when we started thinking about making accessible the live recordings from the venue. We recorded stuff sporadically from the early days of starting, but we recently got a multi-channel recorder which enables us to record virtually everything. And what we wanted to do is set up a service where people could actually download and listen to the things that happen at Cafe Otto, some of those one-off encounters between musicians, some of those kind of unrepeatable performances that might not be able to have attended on that night, and also kind of expand and enable people to kind of engage with what we're doing. And so we're providing more digital content as well as the live recordings, but sort of discussion, podcasts and commissioned writing about the work to kind of help unpack it. But John will talk a little bit more about the specifics of that service.
Yeah, sure. So, as Hamish said, we've been sporadically recording stuff at Otto pretty much since the beginning. We ran a successful fundraising, like crowdfunding kind of thing last year, and off the back of that, we were able to buy this multi-track recorder, which is installed in the venue and means that pretty much since last May, every single concert at Cafe Otto is recorded, and recorded really, really nicely. What we're planning to do with those we've been releasing physical records, which is part of how we know that there's interest outside of London and the UK. We sell a lot of records in Austria for some reason. And so, but we can't put out everything as a really nice LP. It would both cost a fortune and would swallow all of the sort of small bits of time that we have. So what we're looking to do is to start a digital subscription service. What we're thinking is that we're not going to release everything on that service. It will still be a sort of selection of highlights, but with full concert recordings. The idea is that people who subscribe will pay a certain amount each month. At the moment, we're thinking that that figure would be £10 a month, and they would be able to download and own, as Michael talked about, owning music, own 3 concert recordings, and then first of the month, the next month, their credits would renew, and they could download another selection of 3 concerts from what we hope will be a growing archive of concert recordings that we make available. We're hoping to launch before the end of this year with an initial selection of about sort of 20-25 recordings plus all of the recordings that we've already released as a vinyl LP, which is about 11 at the moment. Obviously, we will pay the musicians for their recordings as well. So as well as this being a potential sort of diversified income stream for us, it's also an income stream for the musicians. We need about 150 subscribers a month in order to kind of have the service pay for itself. Beyond that, it will start generating additional revenue that we can put back either into the program, or specifically our thinking is to use that money to put into commissioning additional kind of contextual information, whether it's sort of essays, documentaries, podcasts, all this sort of stuff that helps people kind of engage with the kind of work that we're putting on at the space. And I think that's the gist of it. So, yeah. I mean, we're going to do if you want to come and ask about specific stuff about how we're doing things and, more detail about what's going great and what's being a bit of a drag, then we'll be downstairs later on. Thanks.
Is there any way you can plug my laptop in? It dies.
I'm not sure if we're quite ready for Jeff just yet. So are we?
No,
oh, we are.
Get my laptop
sorry, Joey.
Sometimes it just dies.
Yours, Jeff.
My laptop can die if it's not plugged in. So. All right.
And our last speaker this morning, it's Joey Baxter from EventBox.
Okay, so I'm Joey Baxter. I'm the co-founder and CEO of EventBox. I thought I'd start the presentation talking about why it is we do what we do. And first and foremost, we love events. I've been involved in events in one way or another for over 20 years now. I was a drum and bass MC for many years and performed to audiences in their thousands. And I went on to also produce a lot of drum and bass events. And I've done sponsorship on events. I'm involved in quite a lot of industry events now. And of course, through EventBox, we're involved in getting a lot of people to events. One of the things that I've always loved about events is that simple formula. You've basically got a space, something interesting happening, and some people coming to that thing. And I passionately believe it's a driving force of human evolution. It's something which has changed us, continues to change us, will always change us, going back from Romans in the Colosseum all the way to every gig that's happening now and every festival that you go to. So we're starting with a focus on music events, and our aim is to have more people go to more music events. We believe that if that's the case, more people having more live music adventures means more people having better lives, more inspired lives, more exciting lives, better times. And I looked around for some music quotes, and one I rather liked was actually from Plato, who said, "Music is a moral law. It gives soul to the universe, wings to the mind, flight to the imagination, and charm and gaiety to life and to everything." I think probably everybody in this room could probably just agree that going to more music events would make people's lives better. But I did find myself wondering, is there any evidence, is there any research out there? And in fact, there's a growing body of research which suggests that this is in fact the case. And there's a study into cultural participation and health which said that art stimulations improved perceived physical health, social functioning, and vitality. So if we can agree that going to more live music events makes people feel more content and more inspired, then our question is, what would the world be like if people could go to 2 times as many music events or 3 times as many music events? And that's something that we want to help make happen. Another reason why we do what we do is because we want there to be more artists in the world. And I am kind of biased in this regard. I grew up surrounded by the arts. My dad's an artist, my mum's an artist. And it was a great way of life. I think it's an inspiring way of life for those who follow it. And I think it's an under-realized dream for many, and it's an unrealized dream for too many, and we want to help change that. Going to another man who came up with the hierarchy of needs, so you may have come across him, he said that a musician must make music, an artist must paint, a poet must write if he is to be ultimately at peace with himself. So the converse of that would suggest that if a musician isn't making music, then they're not at peace with themselves. So if we are able to succeed in what we're trying to do, then there'll be more content musicians in the world, and that's something we want to see happen. And also, as going back to where I started, if going to more music events enhances the lives of those that go, it's the musicians that get to give that gift, and we want to give them more opportunities to do that. And I'm going to turn to Schumann, who said that to send light into the darkness of men's hearts, such is the duty of the artist. Now, I'm a bit too much of an optimist to really see darkness in men's hearts, but to send light into people's hearts, I think if we can increase the amount of people who are able to do that, then that's something that would make us very happy. We're also lovers of venues. One of my favorite things in the world is walking into an empty venue in the middle of the day, which is something which I've got to do many times. Obviously, I like them when they're full as well, but it's the sense of potential of what may happen there, and also the sense of history of what's happened there before. And of course, venues are absolutely central to the whole game, and we've got a raft of solutions to help them in every way that we can. So, if we're able to be successful in everything that I've suggested, then what we hope to create is a virtuous cycle. So more people going to more events, leading to more artists and venues, leading to more events for people to go to, and on and on and on. Obviously, there may well be a saturation point, but I don't believe we're anywhere near it yet. And the other reason that we want to do this is, quite frankly, our CTO, Arthur, and me, we want to do it for our own amusement and excitement. It's a great adventure, and we're loving making it happen, so that's another big part of why we're doing it. So how are we going to do it? Now, this is, we're basically, we're looking to come up with a solution that makes it as easy as possible to find music events near you, and as entertaining as possible. And so this is the bit which I'm hoping the volume's going to work and the video's going to work. This is a demo of our app. So it opens with you in Dalston with markers with play buttons on, and you can tap on a marker to hear music from a band that's playing there. No, you can't hear music from a band that's playing there. Okay, let's see if we can do something with the volume here. All right. No, we've got volume on here. Okay, so that's a little bit of a fail. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to talk you through the video. You're going to have to imagine that there's music playing, which obviously makes it 10 times better if there is. Let me just go and go back into present mode and start again. Okay, go on, start again. Let's go back and then forward, see if that does it. All right. No, that's not done it. Okay, here we go. So you're in Dalston, markers on the map with play buttons on. If you tap on a marker, then you'll start hearing music from the artist or artists that are performing there tonight. It'll tell you where it is, what time it starts, who's on, how much. There's a more info button, which we'll come on to in a second. There's a tickets button to go straight through to buy tickets. You can call the venue to buy tickets or to ask them any questions, or the promoter. And if you like an event, then you can heart it. and then there's a bit of a pause before we get to sharing. So assuming you'd want to share it, you can tap on the share button, which allows you to share it via text message, via email, via Twitter, via Facebook. And to go to the next event, you simply swipe the bubble, takes you to the next event. And if you don't like what you're hearing, then you can swipe again, move on to the next event to listen to the artist there. Tap on the More Info button, and it will bring up the full details for the event, including the full lineup and the full address and any event information that they've put on there. And you can swipe an artist to go to another track from them. And then you can also tap on another artist if you want to hear music from somebody else on the lineup. And we got an email at 3 o'clock this morning saying that we've gone live in the App Store, which we're obviously very pleased about. Although we're not actually going to go public for about 2 or 3 more, maybe a couple of weeks, because we've got a bit of back-end stuff to sort out before we do, but we've got through the approval process, so it will be live very soon. Okay, so who's going to use this? Hang on, where's my stuff? Okay, so we think this addresses a problem that affects every music fan at some point or another, that trying to find an event that you want to go to and make a good decision on it when location is a critical factor is very difficult to do. Just try putting in a search on Indie Camden and see what you get up. It takes a long time of trawling and searching and clicking here and clicking there and getting up venue sites and putting in YouTube to try and make a decision. And there isn't a competitor app we found which we think adequately addresses this need. And the sort of main situations, you might be at home and you're thinking to go something nearby with your housemates or with your partner, or equally after work, or you're meeting people after work. And there's 500,000 students that arrive at university each year who don't know their arse from their elbow in the town that they've gone to. So to allow them to quickly access the music scene, there's 31 million tourists that visit the UK each year, again in a similar situation. So location-based searching is something which we believe will help them discover events. If you want to go to an area that you love, it might be you want to go to Soho, or you want to go to Shoreditch, or you want to go to Dalston. So many scenarios where location is a critical factor. We also think there's a massive number of opportunities where people aren't going to events because it isn't that easy to find them. And if it were this easy, then maybe they'd go to more. There's over 800 music venues in London, which to our mind makes it feel like every day in London is a festival. So if you could make it easier for people to find those events, maybe they'd go to more. And we found this interesting stat, which was that 69% of people said they would go to more events if they could easily buy tickets up to and even during the time of an event. Now, in our first version, we'll be able to help that happen. And there's a lot more that we're looking to add in to make that even easier and make even more last-minute tickets available. Something else which was really interesting, we met face-to-face with about 100 people when we were testing this out, and we thought it would be the taste leaders, the ones who usually make the decisions on what to go to, that loved it the most, and they did love it, but what was most interesting was the people who don't normally make the decision, when they saw what we were planning to do, said, well, if it was that easy, I'd get more involved. So we're thinking there's a massive number of people who aren't currently getting involved in the decision-making process that we can get engaged. On the other side, on the other side of our sort of enterprise project is to provide software solutions to venues, solutions which will save them time and money whilst also increasing revenues. There's a whole set of solutions we're working on with venues, which quite a lot we're keeping under our hat for the moment. But one we're going to go live with is publishing publishing profiles for the venues, which will be content enhanced. It'll have music for their full lineup, artwork for each of the artists that are playing, and it'll also be mobile optimized. And from 2/3 of venues, customers tend to be looking at their venue profile on their mobile now, but almost no venues have optimized their profiles for mobile. So we're going to help them with that, as well as our belief that it will increase conversion for them. Am I about out of time? I was just going to check that. Because there's a future-gazing bit which I've got another 75 seconds. 75 seconds, okay. So we're wondering what we can do down the line with the data we're going to have. We're going to be gathering an enormous amount of data on the interaction between artists, venues, and audiences. Which some of that we're going to want to make that data public, see what people can do with it, and we'll also have some commercial options on that as well. But one of the ideas we're aware of is being able to do sort of like a taste map of the UK, and we might be able to discover that hip hop is, say, like the the capital of hip hop in the UK is in Norwich, or you find that for some reason that the jazz capital of the UK is in Cardiff, or that you can go into London and see within London where the main sort of music scenes are as well. So I'll quickly skip through the last couple of things. We're also very keen to see more events happen in amazing spaces. It's something which, similar to going to venues, I love finding sites of natural beauty and thinking it would be great to have more music events here. So you could think of maybe like an Airbnb for artists and promoters to be able to find sites which have been permissioned for performing. So whether it's a beach or in a cave. And finally, beyond the Western world, where we're going to go first, I really look forward down the line to being able to arrive in somewhere like the capital of the Ivory Coast and be able to very quickly access their music scene, which is near impossible now. And the very last thing is we're EventBox rather than MusicBox, so after music we'll be doing comedy and then into theatre and into fashion and beyond and beyond. So that's me, that's EventBox. I'm going to be around for the rest of the day, so come and find me.
Now, we are running over. Do we have time for a little bit of discussion? Okay, one of the things that interests me hearing all of you talk was how, in some ways, familiar a lot of it sounded. So, with you, Jeff, I mean, what you're doing is a tech-updated version almost of the 80s underground band touring networks. What you're doing, Joey, is a return to the old days where information would be curated. It's back to, not quite to the pre-web age, obviously, but it's a retreat from the age where information is thrown at you and you need to do something with it yourself, which was the model not that long ago. And with the Daredevil project, I mean, in the games, one-upmanship has always been at the heart of music for a certain kind of person. Are there new ideas in music that we're yet to discover, or do you see yourselves as fitting into things that have come before and making them work for a new age?
New idea, well, you could give your album away free to 500 million people and see how that works as a new idea. I don't know, but surely music, I mean, I think what we do is, and you touched on it, I think you summed it up quite well, is it's getting a lot of people in a room, for me on the live side, getting a lot of people in a room and putting something interested in it. That's never, you know, and the bells and whistles of how you get them in the room and how they find out about it and the information that, you're right, there's so much noise, is kind of where we're building our things, but I don't know if that's going to, you know, that's because that's what we're holding on to is kind of the thing that technology won't change is that experience, or certainly on the live side. I'm not, you know, I can't think of there being robots, you know, French robots, for example, playing music.
Yeah. I'm intrigued about where things go with beacons, which is something that we're looking into, which is some new tech that's coming in. For those who don't know, it's essentially a local area network. You just pop this little device on a wall and you can set a little zone around it, which could be 3 centimeters to 50 meters, and it's on Bluetooth, and essentially you can publish information over it. So an example could be you walk past a restaurant and your phone kind of blips and their menu appears and you walk in and you can order from your phone. So communication to people in the venue, to people in the venue may well be possible very soon. So that's something that we're keen to look at. And one which caught me last weekend, which I don't know if you know about it or not. So this is not a future one; it's one there now. Is TunePix, which for those who aren't aware of it, it's apparently the fastest growing social network now. And I was really annoyed when I heard the description of it because I kind of figured that most of the terrain of those sort of things have been covered and it's so obvious and no one had done it, which is essentially posting pictures with a piece of music with them and sharing them. And artists have loved it in their droves, and during their presentation they said that 90% of the people followed on Twitter are artists. And so the fact that artists have picked it up is sending it absolutely haywire. And I was kind of, as I say, a little bit annoyed because it seems so obvious.
Now, John and Hamish, you two talked about the community of musicians. Now, on newspapers, we're always obsessing about community. How do you go about building community? You talked to some people about communities of musicians, but presumably you must have a community of kind of regular attenders at Cafe Otto. Do you do that yourselves, or do you link up with other organisations to try and get the word of Cafe Otto? Because I can imagine a scenario in which every group represented on this table, on this stage, could be working together in some way to do that. Do you do things like that at the moment already?
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah. So Cafe Otto couldn't exist if we worked in a sort of blinkered silo and never talked to anyone else. I mean, we both have kind of friends who are writing about the music and talking about it in other ways, and we have people that we work with who also organize events that happen at Cafe Otto, and a lot of the program is also led by musicians who will propose different things that they want to do. And without all of those, it's not really necessarily like a singular community, but without all of those different kind of groups and people interacting, then it would be pretty much impossible to try and do what we're doing.
I mean, I think Cafe Otto, it didn't create a community. Well, it's evolved a community that to some extent existed before it came into being, but it helped give it a kind of a rallying space, a kind of focus, because there wasn't people. When I was putting stuff on before Cafe Otto, we were doing it maybe once a month on average, and it would be here or there, and so I think having that kind of a focus space that was doing it very intensively became, I almost felt like my role was to coordinate and enable almost an existing community and give it a space. And from out of that, other communities have evolved and grown that maybe didn't exist beforehand, but it's given us a kind of a focal.
Do you think that the success of Cafe Otto has been made possible by the digital age? Because I mean, musical tastes have become atomised, or at least we've become much more aware that they've become atomised. So it's now easy for people who like what a mainstream audience might think is unlistenable skronk to gather together and therefore come to Cafe Otto because they know those other people exist.
I think it's been successful through a very focused program. Like when we started, we still don't really have a marketing budget, and my approach to it was we put on the best and most distinctive and focused program that we can, that's as strong as we can make it, and people will find out about that. Now, people find out about it now through sharing that stuff online and digitally. But I think if that didn't exist, if there wasn't digital ways of exchanging that information, people who are super passionate about that kind of music would have found ways of finding out about it. I always thought that the thing that's going to make people find out about what Cafe is doing is if the thing's good enough to make people want to talk about it, and how they do that and the medium through which they do that.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter, because the medium will change, and it will continue to change.
Now, Paul, when you were speaking, you made reference to the fact that there may well be people in the room who might, on some level, almost morally disapprove of what you're doing. Does your heart sink a little every time you see Kate Bush or someone saying, "Please don't take photos at my gigs"?
Not in the slightest, actually. I think it's interesting when you're saying, are there new things coming out in music? And also saying how print media and things. You used to go to a gig and there'd be a photographer who'd take a picture and you'd open it up in the NME the next week and you'd see it. And now everyone's the amateur photographers, but it means that immediately you can see a representation of what's going on. You see it from different sides, but for better, for worse. Sometimes it's great. You're getting a great point of view from somewhere you'd never normally think of it. And sometimes, most of the time, it's terrible. And it doesn't make my heart drop up, because actually what we would love to do is actually take this more into the experience side of it. Not actually, this is a picture of someone on stage. This is a picture of me getting ready for it. This is a picture of me with the artist. Or this is a picture of me at the festival. Or this is something which is great at a music festival. It's more about the sort of experience and making that kind of experience sharing competitive, as opposed to this is just a picture of me from the top and the gods taking a photo from a distance. And I think that's actually the idea of people banning phones and doing that. It's just great because it gets the conversation going. And there's a little bit of Marmite in there as well, which you love it, you hate it, for better, for worse. We sit in an area which some people like, some people love, they live on. Often the sort of the 14 to 30-year-old sort of age demographic, whenever we say it, they go, it's like competitive Snapchat, that's amazing. And then other people just go, I just don't get it. They've asked my parents or anything, it's like, straight over.
Everyone, Hamish, John, Paul, Jeff, Joey, thank you so much for your time.